top 10 takeaways. Oh, I have rarely, if ever, been this ready to go live with a show. I don't know why. I'm so wired. I'm so ready. I've been drinking half calf. It's not fully caffeinated. I made the coffee myself this morning. I know it's half calf. I think. Pretty sure. I don't think I was dosed with any caffeine, but I'm feeling great. I want to talk about this week. There's so much interest, so much intrigue. I love it when everything we thought about the NFL and who's good and who's bad, who's going to get the number one pick, gets turned upside down. So that's what we have to talk about first. My takeaway number 1 or number 10, really, we're going to start. Let's do it for real. Can we do a real? I want to do this. I want to do a real, actual top 10 takeaways. I think we've threatened to do it all year. We've tried to do it a few times, talk about doing it, never actually do 10 takeaways in order, starting at number 1, or in this case, number 10, however you want to think about it. We will start with the lowest priority takeaway at number 10, and we'll work our way down. This is just like a Sports Center show. This is a professional sports show. We're starting at 10, and we're working our way down to 1. That's how we're going to do it. So let's do this. Takeaway number 10. The 2025 NFL draft order just got turned upside down. So let's talk about who the number 1 pick is in the 2025 draft. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just overpaid a bad quarterback. Millions and millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions. Then it's the New York Giants. Then it's the Tennessee Titans, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders. These are the teams with 2 wins. Now, technically, you might say, well, Miami's playing tonight. We'll see what happens. They should win, right? Even though the Rams are favored. So if you just look at the line, it's -2.5 though. It's -2.5. So if it's -2.5 instead of -3, that's Vegas saying the Dolphins are 0.5 points better than the Rams. I think the Dolphins are better than that. I think it's a wider disparity, but the way the lines shake out, they're just going to come in at -2.5 on the Rams. And Dolphins should win this. So let's go Dolphins. Let's get. I want the Dolphins out of here. I don't want to worry about the Dolphins or where they're drafting. I want to get them out of there. We've got so many bad teams to talk about because after the Dolphins are sitting at 6 at this moment, pick 6. Pick 7 is New England. Pick 8 is New York, the Jets. And then you've got pick 9, New Orleans. At this point, the Carolina Panthers have fallen all the way to pick 10. This has been the worst team in the league. How is the worst team picking 10? That's odd, right? And there's no guarantee that they're going to move up because they face a bunch of teams that are also bad or getting worse, in fact, as the season goes along. Now, there is one team that I think is the dark horse. The dark horse to be the number 1 overall pick. Currently, as it stands, the Dallas Cowboys are the number 11 pick overall, as it stands. And I think that the only thing that can happen as this season plays out is the Dallas Cowboys just keep getting more and more and more and more humiliated. There are a couple games to look for on the schedule as the season plays out. Week 13, the Cowboys face the New York Giants. That's big. Week 15, the Cowboys face the Carolina Panthers. It is very possible. Again, we just saw Saints win. Panthers win. Patriots win. This is the NFL. This is as NFL as the NFL's ever been, with all these bad teams winning. It's very possible, given how bad that Dallas looks and is, really, that they could get the number 1 overall pick, and that would be very interesting. Then they would have their pick of quarterbacks if they wanted to go quarterback, which would be fun. There's a lot of directions they could go. I just happen to remember a guy named Sanders who looked really good in a Dallas Cowboys uniform. Well, that star, that lone star on the helmet there. Fella named Sanders really looked good in that uniform. And there's going to be another Sanders coming out in the NFL draft. It's possible. You don't even need the number 1 overall pick, maybe, right? Where is Shagur Sanders going to get drafted? The Cowboys could be in line to get Shagur Sanders. That is something that I would love to see. Regardless of need, regardless of what happens with Dak, if you're a Cowboys fan and you say, hey, should we draft Shagur Sanders? They're all going to say, yes, please, absolutely. 100 out of 100 Dallas Cowboys fans would want Jerry Jones or Jerry Jones' son or whoever the hell is there running the place now to draft Shagur Sanders. So I think that's now a takeaway. I think that's takeaway number 10. Man, that's probably, we might have to go reorder this. Everyone in the comments, please reorder the takeaways. I don't think that that's actually number 10. That's probably should be higher up on the list. But I'm figuring this out as we go. I've been doing this show for 5 years, and I've never actually given a tight top 10 takeaways. So we're learning how to do this together. Help me. Help me help you. Put the actual order in the comments. Write it down as we do the show, and then you put the order that you think it should be, the prioritization should be. Did anyone play Marquez Valdes-Scantling on Sunday? Did anyone play in DFS and deep leagues, streaming and flex? Did anyone play Marquez Valdes-Scantling? If you did, that was great. That was what we talk about. He was this week's Nick Westbrook-Akine. I just didn't happen to have a roster spot in order to play him this week, but he was the Nick Westbrook-Akine. I wasn't in desperation mode like I was the week prior, where I played Nick Westbrook-Akine, and it was a glorious moment. Didn't happen. Didn't get a chance to play Scantling. He only had 3 targets. Anytime you can parlay 3 targets into 25 fantasy points, you're absolutely maxing out your opportunities. You're the anti-Najee Harris. Because I look up, Najee Harris had a touchdown. Najee Harris had 20-plus touches. And Najee Harris had 11 fantasy points. It's like, how does it? You're delivering a half a fantasy point per touch, per opportunity? That is so embarrassing for Najee Harris. So takeaway number 9 is that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is the anti-Najee Harris and this week's Nick Westbrook-Akine. Another option, once you found out that Nico Collins was not going to play, John Metchie. John Metchie for the win. John Metchie looks good. John Metchie looks back. The guy had cancer. So we had 2 guys that have beat cancer in James Conner, smashed. This was the James Conner week. I mean, the Cardinals, they beat the Jets by 25 points. And if James Conner doesn't get there at home, beating a team by 25, then it's never going to happen for James Conner ever again. And of course, he delivered. Great. He actually was the leading receiver, 80 receiving yards. You love it, right? When the opposing defense does have a lockdown corner, then it's more likely that you have a running back leading that team in receiving yards. He wasn't even the only running back that led his team in receiving yards this week. We'll talk about another running back who did, and I have an interesting takeaway related to that player later in the show. And for the moment, let's talk about Fast Draft, because Fast Draft DFS is launching this week. I just got out of a meeting. Fast Draft DFS will be live this week. Check it out, fastdraft.app, and you can learn more right now. Oh, the NFL season is underway, and if you drafted on Fast Draft this summer, the Origins All-Rookie game, the Flex 4 game, check the live scoring, see where you are in the standings. You might be in line for a big payday. And no matter where you are in the world, you should have the Fast Draft app because there's a custom Dynasty mock tool that's free to everybody with super sharp ADPs, and we're rolling out DFS tournaments throughout the year, and the 2025 tournaments will go live before any of us realize, oh my God, the 2025 season is upon us. Download Fast Draft, register, and you will be alerted as soon as these new contests are unleashed. Check it out on fastdraft.app. Not bad. Not bad. So John Metchie was the play this week. He was efficient. He scored a bunch of fantasy points. I was happy to see it. You have to be happy for him. You have to be happy for him. And just don't regret playing Tank Dell. Tank Dell had the matchup. He had the target conservation on his side of the ledger. Got the 9 targets. And he had over 100 yards the week prior. He's already shown that he is working his way to 100% health from that tightrope procedure that happened, now many months ago. And we have multiple players. Mark Andrews, another one, where, turns out it takes half a season, but eventually these players will heal and they will start to perform at 100% capacity. This was just the random variance that happens in the NFL. This will strike any given player, any given time. Marquez Valdes-Scantling gets 3 targets and 25 fantasy points. Tank Dell, who is more explosive than Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's a better player, triples that number of targets and only delivers a handful of fantasy points. That's the NFL, and that's specifically the wide receiver position. Playing Tank Dell was great process. And if you decided to stream Metchie, then bravo. Bravo. Really, I think Metchie was actually more this week's Nick Westbrook-Akine than Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was still a thin play. He only had the 3 targets. It just happened to work out for him. And Taysom Hill was very popular on the Starter Stream show. Taysom Hill, very popular play. And I said, we didn't have him in the top 10 among tight ends. I liked it. I liked it as an upside play. They certainly like to run the Wildcat with Taysom Hill in the end zone or around the end zone, at least inside the 10. But that's it. That's how he's going to score fantasy points. That's a touchdown-dependent player. That's not a player that's going to command volume in any phase of the game. So Taysom Hill was sort of an opportunity share trap where they have to feed Taysom Hill, and you expected him to get at least 5+ touches, most of them in the red zone. I get it, but if he doesn't score, he doesn't get there. That's the danger where you get a guy that's a starting wide receiver like a John Metchie in a game where there's going to be a lot of points scored. That's a better play. So if you were somehow at a flex position decision between Taysom Hill and John Metchie was also the right process play. Takeaway number 8. What a beautiful thing to see. Darnell Mooney getting there without a long touchdown. You love to see the double-digit targets for Darnell Mooney. We love to see just the consolidation of the targets there in Atlanta. This is very much 49ers East Atlanta, where you have your CMC in Bijan Robinson, and you've got your big receiver, your big, your sort of short and intermediate route running receiver, Debo and Drake London. You've got your athletic tight end, and you've got your big play receiver on the outside, super versatile. Brandon Ayuk, right? Brandon Ayuk is, I think, a legitimate comp for Darnell Mooney. Look at what Brandon Ayuk delivered in fantasy football this year on a per-game basis. Now look at what Mooney's been delivering. Tell me there's not similarities between Darnell Mooney and Brandon Ayuk and the offense, the consolidated target distribution that you're getting in Atlanta, similar to San Francisco. And Bijan Robinson, which I think this has to be takeaway number 7, Bijan Robinson is Christian McCaffrey. 28 fantasy points, right? So a bunch of weeks in a row, if you're looking at the game logs, it's Bijan, he's getting the touches, not getting the touchdowns, or he's getting the targets, he's not getting the carries, whatever it was holding him under 20 fantasy points, and he's broken that ceiling. He's now giving you those CMC ceiling weeks, the 28 fantasy points this week. Meanwhile, the running back that misguided fantasy gamers were drafting over him, Breece Hall, 12 fantasy points. And what was the big difference? The big difference we talked about, not just the talent disparity where Breece Hall is a better all-purpose running back. He's better between the tackles, and he's as good as Breece Hall everywhere else. Plus, the offense in Atlanta is better. And they both have, between the tackles, runners that are going to take carries and gladly, right? They're glad to give up carries between the 20s to Algier and Braylon Allen. The big difference between Bijan and Breece Hall was that we knew the Atlanta offense would be much better than the Jets offense, and that's exactly what's happened. And that's one of the reasons why Breece Hall can't get there. He can't get there. He can't get there. And another running back that's looking better, looking healthier. Bones heal, ligaments heal. It just takes time. And guys can play through these injuries and eventually get back to 100%. Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor finally going over 100 yards, giving you that nice yards per carry. I know you guys all love the yards per carry. He's getting healthy on schedule. We had a whole long discussion, or actually it was more of a monologue on this show about the timeline to recover from a high ankle sprain. It turns out that if you go back and rerun the tape, Jonathan Taylor was at the tail end of that timeline this week and then goes over 100 yards. And the Darnell Mooney of this week, where Darnell Mooney was Darnell Mooney, now Darnell Mooney is Brandon Ayuk. So now that Darnell Mooney is no longer Darnell Mooney, every week we have to find who's that Darnell Mooney, who's that outside field stretcher that you're playing in flex over the Najee Harris type grinder backs, right? We talk about play the wide receiver in PPR that can go get you 100 yards, get you a long touchdown. Who was that this week? Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, he was the personification of the Darnell Mooney corollary in fantasy football. And on the Starter Stream show, there were a couple players this week that I didn't love, but you look at the projections and you got to play them. Right? And I didn't love the matchup, still got to play him, right? You don't love the player, don't love the matchup, but the projections say, hey, based on the opportunities and this player's role in the offense, you got to play him. That was the case. That was a big theme of this week. You're playing these guys that are gross, that you don't even like, and you, in particular, you hate the matchup, but you just have to just plug your nose and play him. And Alec Pierce, not a guy I love, but given the situation with Michael Pittman out, it made all the sense in the world to play Alec Pierce this week. And what does he do? He delivers. He's the receiving leader. He gets a touchdown. It was a beautiful thing. And while we're on the subject of Bijan Robinson is now the new Christian McCaffrey, we also have another player who is the new player. We have a new Aaron Jones. The new Aaron Jones in the league is Tyrone Tracy, except the difference with Tyrone Tracy is he went to a major conference school. He got drafted a little bit earlier in the NFL draft. He's also older than Aaron Jones was when he came out at UTEP. And imagine a world. Imagine a world. We're in a world. Imagine a world. Imagine The Rock and Logan from The Office, or whatever, right? It's funny how guys that were in The Office, guys that were, the nerd character in some, cult classic comedy show are now like action heroes in Hollywood. It's just fascinating stuff. It's interesting how that works. But Tyrone Tracy, now the Aaron Jones, and if you run the thought experiment, what if the Packers had committed to Aaron Jones when he was a rookie? Because they never actually committed to him. They only committed to him in a handful of games total. They're like, oh no, we got to get this A.J. Dillon guy touches. We got to draft this A.J. Dillon guy in day 2 because he's big and fast. So we'll never actually install Aaron Jones as a primary back. The Giants are like, no. We have the leader, like the locker room, super solid running back we can trust. He's not going to fumble, like ball security and pass protection. He's given it. Devin Singletary is motor. He's got the nickname. He's a guy we can trust. Never mind. We're starting and playing Tyrone Tracy and giving him all the volume he can handle. I love that. I love Brian Daboll. There's a bunch of reasons why Brian Daboll is the coach that I would be circling. I would just be circling like in the air. As long as we had enough fuel, we would just be circling the plane, and then we'd be dive bombing to get Brian Daboll if the Giants are dumb enough to let him go. Because he and Neighbors are the best thing the Giants have. And now Tyrone Tracy. The fact that he just has marginalized motor. Again, this is locker room leader guy that they just signed as a free agent and brought in as the answer. Never mind. You love to see that. You absolutely love to see that. Now, takeaway number 6, right? This was alluded to earlier. There are players that I don't like. There are players that I find to be overrated. And it's interesting when the fantasy public decides they're out on those players and then they go too far. So that's what we had this week, where the public went too far with the hate. They went too far with the Marvin Harrison hate because you're just looking for a reason. Now I got Sauce Gardner, terrible matchup. I'm going to bench Marvin Harrison. And there were a couple examples in the Starter Stream show. Do I start Marvin Harrison or Jameson Williams? Many of you really wanted to get cute by starting Jameson Williams, and that was a mistake. I said, no, actually, guys, first of all, I'm just looking at the projections, and we have these guys, Harrison and Ridley. They're still top 30 receivers. It's unlikely that you're in a league where you're benching a top 30 receiver. So please don't do that. And if you're going to be benching Harrison or you're going to be benching Calvin Ridley, you're probably just getting too cute. And I understand you don't want to play. I don't want to play Ridley against the Chargers. I don't want to play Harrison against Sauce Gardner. But these guys are getting a lot of targets. Big time target share and air yard share for Calvin Ridley and Marvin Harrison Jr. Whether you like them or hate them, you have to go to Player Profiler and look at the advanced opportunity metrics and be like, okay, I have to start this guy. There's also no such thing as a true shadow corner. So even if Marvin Harrison is struggling against Sauce Gardner, there's going to be particular plays they call to try to free up Marvin Harrison, and he's going to get those targets. And even if it's just 5 catches, gets the touchdown, boom, 15 plus fantasy points. And if it's Calvin Ridley, I mean, that's a riddle, right? How the hell do you do that? The team scores 17 points. Levis only had 175 yards. And yet, Ridley goes for 25 fantasy points. Ridley and Marquez Valdez-Scantling both had 25 fantasy points, which I just find to be magical. That's a riddle, right? How does he even do that? All of the Levis-driven wide receiver fantasy points went to Calvin Ridley, and that's just what happens. It's the NFL. All the touchdowns the Titans scored were scored by Calvin Ridley. You just have to hold your nose and start these players that are overrated in bad situations. If you know they are the one true primary option in their passing game, you just, especially over Jameson Williams. I mean, come on, Jameson Williams. I know he got hurt, right? And we should go through the injuries. Let's run through the injuries briefly. Miles Sanders left with an ankle injury, did not return. Malik Neighbors was concussed, but returned after he passed the protocol. So was he concussed? Right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it make a sound? Well, it's bad. Like, I don't love this for Neighbors. This is just, how did Neighbors not even score 15 fantasy points? Well, Marvin Harrison's going to end up outscoring Neighbors, and it's going to be because of injury. That's the reason why. It's going to kill me. It's going to kill me. Chuba Hubbard had a minor knee injury, did return. Whew. Right? I mean, this guy not going anywhere. I mean, Jonathan Brooks. I wish that the camera would focus on Jonathan Brooks during some of these touchdowns by Chuba Hubbard. He's in the end zones, celebrating with his teammates. I want the camera to pan to Jonathan Brooks, please. NFL directors, please make that happen. Tank Bigsby left with an ankle injury. Aaron Jones with a chest injury, but he did return. Najee Harris, an ankle injury. He returned, unfortunately. Calvin Austin, concussion. You hate to see it. Jamison Williams, hyperextended knee. So that partly explains why he underperformed. He's also, again, the number one knucklehead in the league. Dalton Kincaid, knee injury, didn't return. Same with Sam Laporta, Dallas Goedert, and Xavier Worthy left with a shoulder injury. Xavier Worthy looking like the bust of this class. We knew a first-rounder would bust. Of the wide receivers, who would it be? It's actually Xavier Worthy. He's been set up in the perfect situation. No Rashee Rice. He has Patrick Mahomes, and he can't get going. Can't get out of his own way. And as it turns out, Adonai Mitchell, 6 for 6. Adonai Mitchell was the better receiver at Texas. Just a better all-around receiver. And Anthony Richardson very well may be back. Right? Colts lost, opening the door for them to bring back Anthony Richardson, and he may find a connection with Adonai Mitchell. It's intriguing. I'm intrigued by this possibility. I think Adonai Mitchell was a great add by anybody who added him heading into this week, knowing that Michael Pittman wasn't going to play, and he's a very efficient playmaker. I think they're all set at wide receiver moving forward with Adonai Mitchell on one side, Josh Downs on the other. You have Alec Pierce stretching the field. They need to trade Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman needs to be put on the block. He needs to be moved. If I am Chris Ballard, I am moving Michael Pittman ASAP. Takeaway number 5. The Vikings defense is too fucking good. I'm pissed. I mean, if you're a Vikings fan, then great. But for us fantasy gamers, this Vikings defense is annoying. It is too good. It's hurting their offense. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is supposed to be just a smash week. But your defense is just blotting out the sun. Jacksonville can't get out of their own way. Mac Jones barely goes over 100 yards. Poor Mac Jones. I thought this could be a little bit of a Mac Jones week. A little Mac Jones season, a little sizzle from Mac Jones. No. And important note, and we put this every Sunday, we post the injuries for fantasy football. And playing with limitations. We have a category called playing with limitations. Brian Thomas and Deebo Samuel. I said, be careful starting these two guys. Based on the projections, you might want to start them, but these are the two players you might want to discount in the projections just because we know they're not at 100%. And Brian Thomas not himself with his chest injury. And he's playing through. He's a warrior. Longer term, I love it. I love it because a chest injury is not going to hurt a guy longer term for Dynasty, but you love that that's the work ethic. You love that's how that guy's wired. You love to see that Brian Thomas, dog, just playing through it. You love to see it, but the Vikings defense, it's a problem. Between Darnold, Aaron Jones, and even Justin Jefferson, 25 total fantasy points scored. Puke. This is something that we need to factor in moving forward, and you need to be careful. I mean, I can't believe this is happening. Of all the things, right? Darnold would hit, and Jones, total warrior. TJ Hawkinson coming back. He was the leading receiver. He looks like he's fully ramped up and totally back online where he should be, fully integrated. Love to see it. It's the offense. And yet, they're like, we don't need to score any points. Not with this defense. Like, ow, fuck. Takeaway number 4. And this one's important, especially for DFS. Terry McLaurin must be played and played aggressively when he's on the main slate. He has to be. Terry McLaurin has 7 15-plus fantasy point finishes in the last 8 weeks. Think about what I just said. And yet, he's not going over 20. That's damn hard to do, right? To have 7 of 8 weeks where you're between 15 and 20 fantasy points. How do you do that? And he does it all different ways. Some weeks he goes over 100 yards. Some weeks he scores 2 touchdowns on no yards, right? But he's not doing both. He's not putting up big yards on one day and then scoring a bunch of touchdowns on the other. That big spike week is coming. It's hanging out there. It's the most obvious spike week of the season, is just hanging out there. It's like a ripe fruit ready to be picked. It's just like you see it. It's just the coloring has changed and it's softened and you're just ready to pick it off the stem. It's right there. It's like it's bending the branch. The fruit is bending the branch. And that's Terry McLaurin. He's so ready to go nuclear. I mean, we're talking about he could go for 160 and 3. Like, he's the type of guy that can give you a 40-point week. He's been teasing it all year. Please play him. Play him in all formats, whether it's a pick'em game, whether it's a DFS game, whatever game it is. Play Terry McLaurin for the love of God. Take advantage of those spike weeks. Harry Snowman likes Pittman. Harry Snowman is reminding the chat that Pittman has a bad back. He's a physical receiver, big catch radius. I get it. He's going to be better next year. I just think that he would be better off on another team. They don't need him anymore. Adonai Mitchell can play that role just as well as he can. So there's no point. There's plenty of teams that need a receiver like Michael Pittman, and I am in favor of optimizing available skills, just like I was in favor of Khalil Herbert getting the hell out of Chicago. Finally, they did it. They did the thing. They optimized. The Colts need to optimize. And yes, depending on where Michael Pittman goes, he could be a very strong buy in Dynasty, knowing that it was the bad back that held him back. A little bonus takeaway, courtesy of a Harry Snowman. Takeaway number 3. Eberfluss and Waldron are gone. That's obvious, right? Because I think, what did he say? We will look at everything. When asked about who's going to be doing the play calling moving forward, Eberfluss said, we're going to look at everything, right? You think we're going to look at everything? Really? Wow, that's crazy. So anytime that's the next move, the next move is to look at everything. Well, not only is the offensive coordinator gone, the coach is gone, right? That we know. The takeaway is what happens to Ryan Poles, because that is the real danger. You can just construct the perfect rebuild, like what happened in Detroit. And if you don't get a Dan Campbell, if you don't get the right coach in place, well, it's always a danger. There's so many different things that you have to align just right to get things to play out so that you yourself can absorb all these losses, right? All these losses. Brad Holmes absorbed all these losses, all last place finishes, and somehow, some way, not get fired. Like, that is the big trick. That's why so many teams don't tank out in the open for the majority of the season, because they don't want to get fired, and the GMs don't want to get fired either. And it's funny because Ryan Poles thought he was through it. He got his quarterback, right? So he's like, okay, I'm past the danger zone. I'm safe now. We're going to improve this year. Clearly, our team is way better. Like, the talent on that Chicago Bears team, especially on defense, orders of magnitude better than it was a couple years ago. And yet, because the coach decision And then it goes downhill to the offensive coordinator decision because those hires were so bad. Whatever great decisions you made bringing in a 4th-round edge rusher, those get nullified by a bad coaching decision, and then they drag you down. Right? It's just like you're rock climbing, you're trying to get there. It's incredibly dangerous. It's a tenuous situation. And then sometimes someone falling off the cliff, they drag you down into the gorge with them and you both die. That's a real danger in rock climbing, and that is what we're seeing in Chicago. I'm super worried about. I like Ryan Poles. I think he's at least average, if not above average, as a general manager, and I think this could cost him. This could he could be like falling. You can see it, right? You can see it. Takeaway number 2. Look at Rachaad White and Bucky Irving and a tap kip, or actually I got a little headband here. A little headband snap. Ooh, that's an innovation. Is there such thing? This is the new cap tip. Right? Headband snap. I think this is going to catch on. Oh, I can see it catching on. Yes. Evan Ringler had this so perfect. Had Irving and Rachaad White adjacent in the rankings. And when I was looking at it and talking about it on the Starter Stream show, it's like, well, one guy's at 24, one guy's at 22, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, 2 Buccaneers running backs in the top 24. How is that even? Can we do that? I mean, this isn't the Lions. How does that work? Right? This is exactly how it works. How it works is when you run the numbers and you do the math, the projection math, and you say, well, these amount of points need to be scored. Who are they going to be scored by? Are they going to be scored by Jarrett, Sterling Shepard? Right? Who's going to score these points? Ryan Miller? Who is going to score these points? Well, the answer is Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. They're going to have 10 targets between them. But it's going to be Rachaad White delivering 18 fantasy points, most of them in the passing game, which is exactly what we talked about. And then Bucky Irving also 17 fantasy points. I mean, it was just like those guys, same number of fantasy points. And we had this, conversation with Alex Dunlap where I put him on the spot. I said, Alex, how much does it matter? How much does it matter that Baker Mayfield has no receivers left? What is the impact? And he's like, well, I mean, the guy's scoring 25 fantasy points a game. I'm like, I know, but that was then. This is now. I said, this is a 10-point swing. This takes a guy from 24 fantasy points to 14 fantasy points a game. And then sure enough, against San Francisco, whose pass defense, not the strongest, Baker Mayfield, 10 fantasy points. This is the value of receivers. They really matter. Quality receivers really matter to quarterbacks more than most NFL analysts will ever talk about. Your running backs will get there. Your running backs will be active in the receiving game, and you, the quarterback, will score 10 fantasy points. That's just what happens. And please, Jalen McMillan, hurry back. We need you. Right? We need you. I think I mentioned on the last top 10 takeaways, like, or was it the Mind of Mansion? A show from last week. Well, I wanted to stream Jalen McMillan. I thought Jalen McMillan was the John Metchie of this week. But sadly, no, he couldn't get back on the field. So these hamstring injuries, man, cost Brian Robinson yet another week. So we need to be more careful with these hamstring injuries and assume a couple more weeks here. Look at Nico Collins. He was activated. He passed all the tests, and they didn't play him. NFL teams are terrified of hamstring injuries, and that's not even a takeaway. That's a bonus takeaway. So again, we tried to keep it at 10 I think at this point, with a couple bonus takeaways plus the Harry Snowman takeaway, we're probably up to like 13, 14 takeaways. So we failed again. We're going to keep trying, though. We're going to keep trying. And we've gone over 30 minutes. I thought we could keep it to a nice, tight 30 minutes. We couldn't. It's 40 minutes now. Fuck. Damn it. I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't create boundaries. I can't create parameters to stick in. I can't do it. It's a skill I don't have. I don't have the ability to limit myself to a certain number of minutes and stick to it. It's not something I can't do it. The number one takeaway that I have is shame on everyone. Shame on you. Shame on Theo. Shame on Alan. Shame on everyone but me, really, for forgetting about Jalen Hurts. Remember the Sonic Truth show? We dropped the Sonic Truth podcast. Went live on Friday, dropped the podcast on Saturday. And they're talking about Josh Allen. They're talking about Lamar Jackson. Talking about whoever who's the QB1 in Dynasty. And I'm like, excuse me. Excuse me. Why not Jalen Hurts? Oh, yeah, I guess we have to make it a big 4. And I'm like, wait, isn't he 2 years younger than Josh Allen? What am I missing? They have the same body. They have the same game. What are we talking about? He doesn't have the same arm as Josh Allen. I understand that. But the youth and the weapons make him at least as valuable. This makes sense. So I'm so happy for Jalen Hurts. He's been underrated in every format of fantasy, and he delivered once again. Just crushed it. All the reasons why, I was worried about Saquon Barkley, then you should be drafting Jalen Hurts if he's going to score all these touchdowns. Look at the MVP odds. He's plus 3,000. Then he's plus 2,000. Then he's plus 1,500. He's going to be plus 800 now. And there's a lot of football to play. A lot of football to play, everybody. Get ready. Get ready. I know, listen, Lamar looks like a lock. He looks like a lock, and he's been playing great. Again, look what he did to Cincinnati. He looks like a lock. Lamar. He's got to be the MVP. He is the MVP. It's going to be Lamar Jackson. Unless it's Jalen Hurts. Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.